a summary of the collaboration rubric. The questions that are asked, are students required to work together? If yes, that gets you to a 2 coding score. So the requirement to collaborate in pairs or in groups gets you to a 2. In the learning activity, so this is in a lesson, do students have shared responsibility? If no, they remain at a 2. If they do have shared responsibility, it takes the learning activity to a 3. If they have to make substantive decisions together, it can get to a 4. And if work is interdependent, if their collaborative teamwork is interdependent, then that learning activity could be coded a 5. And these rubrics are really designed to help teachers think through how they're designing learning activities in ways that will deeply help them, help students to develop these skills. So with that, I'd like you to open up House on Mango Street, the learning activity example, and I'm going to invite some of the other folks on the line to start to discuss this example. But what we're going to do is look at this example, talk about it for a moment, and then ask each one of you to come and vote on the poll on what kind of code you think this learning activity is. And could I ask Jenny, actually, for you to talk a little bit about what the House on Mango Street learning activity lesson, what it's asking folks to do?
Okay. And I think it's interesting that we start with what they were asked to do versus what they ended up doing. So the focus is House on Mango Street, which is a book. And the class age of the students responding to this learning activity are 13 years old. So we're expecting a reasonable capacity to be able to collaborate together on the task. And when you look at what the teacher asked to do in terms of the learning activity, one, to read the book first, but if you look at the wording in the script, it's very much Bloom's taxonomy, higher order, because the children were asked to synthesize information, and then coming to particular groups to start to gather, synthesize information, and then start to make some deeper connections with what the real immigrants' viewpoint would have been about coming to the US. So it was designed as a higher order task. So moving through then the process, yes, they were required to work in groups, and they were required to use technology in the activity. But as we started to go through the teacher's evaluation and the task that the students ended up doing, they didn't end up working in groups to produce the product.
That's right, that's right. They were asked to share feedback with each other. So each student was asked to write a poem about an immigrant's experience coming to the United States. And they were asked to share those poems with each other in pairs and provide feedback to each other. So that, and then, but each student was graded individually on their own poem. Mm-hmm. So given that, we're seeing lots of scores here of a 2, a few that are a 3, and I'm going to ask Delana, who's another teacher on the line, to talk about what she thinks this should be coded as and why.
Hi. So looking at this, I definitely agree that it starts off by saying that there's going to be group work together, and then the only option they provide is just feedback. So if you look in the rubric, it has the feedback section on page 3, if you have the handout in front of you. It says it's working together. Yes, pairs of students give feedback together, but then is it shared responsibility? No. So it's a shared responsibility component that we're missing, so I would have to score it as a 2 when I go through it. So do you want me to talk about possible changes to that at this point?
Not quite yet. I want to highlight one thing. Thank you both. Those are great discussions, and it's in these discussions with teachers that where they're starting to try to decide what's the code, that people start to really think about, oh, is this a 2 or a 3, and what would it take to be a 3, that it can start to activate teachers thinking about how they could redesign learning activities. And in fact, thinking about the lessons that all of you on the call have seen and the teachers that have produced, where they're trying to do collaboration. How frequently do they get beyond it to? I mean, how frequently do teachers really design projects where students have to have shared responsibility? Most times in most learning activities where teachers believe they're doing collaboration, they just ask students to work together loosely. And so they're not going to a high degree of collaboration in a way that really builds these types of skills. But Delana's absolutely right. The way this learning activity, this example learning activity is designed right now, it would just achieve a 2, which is what most teachers' projects would achieve in the way they design them right now. Now I'd ask you, Delana, to talk a little bit about how this type of learning activity might become a 3 or a 4.
So I was looking at it, and I think that this is an exciting project. I can see so many different options and different things where a teacher can really open it up for more student autonomy and collaboration. For example, the teacher could let the students work together, assigning responsibilities inside the group, as we mentioned before. They can track editing through a cloud-based application, meaning they can even do it outside of class time if needed. The roles could be things like having a recorder, a primary presenter, editors, developer, project manager, shape as needed for the age and specifications of that class. And also, I think the class could choose different types of presentation mediums. She suggests using a poem, but I can't help but think that maybe a dance or a song or a piece of artwork can also explain the journey of an immigrant. And also, I think that as a class or a small group, they could develop questions and discuss them and create rubrics for the interview, so they can decide how they're going to score each other's work as an entire class.
Great ideas. Go ahead, yeah.
I'm Azhar from Egypt. If I have the chance to redesign this activity, I can divide the students into groups. Each group will read a part of the book. Then I invite them to a large open discussion to share their ideas about the immigrant experience. I ask them, each group to create a list of questions to ask an immigrant from neighborhood or a family. And after interviewing again, I invite the students to a more discussion to find out the problems and challenges that those people face. The last step will be creating a poem in groups again, because I noticed that in this activity, each student will create his or her own poem. But I want my students to do this in groups. Each member should have a certain role during the creation process. For example, they collaborate with each other to write the first draft of the poem. Then one of them write or type it using any program. Another will revise and edit it to make it ready for presentation. Another one will present it in front of the class. Again, maybe my students don't like to write the poem, so they can make some sort of short play to act in front of other people to share their experience. That's what I can do.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that story. That's a perfect example of how you can use this to really think through how to improve a learning design, a learning activity. And yeah, just the simple, making 2 or more students responsible for writing a poem together takes this to a higher degree. And I believe somebody else had something to say on this theme as well.
Maria, it's Tracy. I had a question. I wonder, how does collaboration look differently based on the age of the students?
That's a great question. Does anybody on the line want to talk about that? It's the idea that students at any age can do collaboration. Children from a very young age start to do projects together. But you would want to think about the degree of shared responsibility. I mean, if students can do work individually, it stands to reason they can do work collaboratively. It's really a matter of whether students have any experience and any models in their head for working in this way, and that can be begun very early. And we've seen teachers who are building very, very collaborative projects for their kindergartners. You know, the complexity of a project and the complexity of the content and the assessment mechanisms need to be attuned to students' age, but certainly students at any age can begin to collaborate.
Mm. And I think another learning about the collaboration area in particular is the test. Would the student had to collaborate to complete this the way this task is actually designed? And my answer is that no, the kiddie could have done it all by themselves. So I think in the learning about how to design collaboration tasks, the teacher really needs to think that at the end of the day that this activity was much more successful because collaboration was involved or had to be involved.
That's right, that's right. It really, really comes down to how the work is assessed and whether they're assessed individually or whether they're assessed as a group. And I mean, I think about the collaboration of us putting this call together and how each of us has a specific role. Heather's running the technical side of it. Tracy's done an amazing job organizing it. My job is the content, and all of us have to work together very closely to make the whole thing come off. It's the same kind of thing, but we had to learn this type of collaboration experience on the job. We unfortunately didn't have too much experience doing this kind of work in schools before we got here.